Is it possible to win a game when your opponent wrote the rules, hired the referees, and owns the stadium? Today, across Africa, citizens are facing a massive wave of democratic backsliding. In places like Tanzania, political transitions look clean on paper, but underneath, the ruling party still holds absolute power. To understand today's political crisis, we have to look back to 1992. This is the second chapter of Tanzania's incomplete democratic rebuilding. It uncovers a dark institutional riddle. Can you actually build a free democracy on top of a one-party foundation? When Tanzania returned to multi-party politics in 1992, there were no tanks surrounding the presidential palace. There was no revolution. The ruling party had not lost a civil war, and an opposition movement had not seized power. The political system was reformed by the same political establishment that had governed the country under one-party rule. That makes Tanzania's democratic transition unusual. In Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda's ruling party was defeated at the ballot box in 1991. In Benin, a national conference dramatically reorganized political power. In South Africa, negotiations dismantled apartheid and produced an entirely new constitutional order. Tanzania followed a different path. The ruling party, CCM, managed the transition itself. President Ali Hassan Mwinyi appointed a commission. CCM debated its recommendations. Parliament amended the constitution, and multi-party politics was introduced without replacing the government that had administered the one-party state. This produced one of Tanzania's most important political achievements, a peaceful transition. But it also created a question that would follow every election afterwards. How much of the old system had actually changed? By the beginning of the 1990s, the political world around Tanzania was changing rapidly. The Cold War was ending. The Soviet Union was collapsing. Western governments and international financial institutions were increasingly linking development, governance, and political reform. Across Africa, one-party states were under pressure. In Zambia, demands for multi-party politics were growing. Benin had convened a national conference. Political liberalization was spreading across the continent. But Tanzania's transition cannot be explained only by foreign pressure. The country itself had changed. Economic reforms had already begun under President Ali Hassan Mwinyi. The state's relationship with society was changing. New social organizations were emerging. Public debate was widening. And some of the institutions created under one-party rule were increasingly being questioned. How powerful should the president be? Should parliament exercise stronger oversight? Should the ruling party remain intertwined with state institutions? Should citizens have the right to organize politically outside CCM? These questions were not only being asked by opposition activists, they were appearing inside the political establishment itself. In February 1991, President Mwinyi appointed a presidential commission to examine whether Tanzania should continue with the one-party system or introduce multi-party politics. Its chairman was Tanzania's Chief Justice, Francis Nyalali. The Nyalali Commission did not simply sit in Dar es Salaam and write a report. It traveled. According to later analysis of the Commission's work, it held more than 1,000 public meetings. More than 36,000 people spoke. Citizens were asked about Tanzania's political future, and the result appeared overwhelming. More than 77% of those consulted reportedly preferred continuation of the one-party system. At first glance, the answer seemed obvious. Tanzanians wanted one-party rule. So why did the Nyalali Commission recommend multi-party democracy? Because the percentages told only part of the story. When citizens described the political system they wanted, many demanded reforms. A stronger parliament, less concentration of presidential power, greater accountability, a clearer separation between the ruling party and the state, political freedom, reform of regional and district commissioners, protection of fundamental rights. The commission faced a paradox. Many citizens said, "Keep the one-party system." But many also demanded reforms that sat uneasily with the existing one-party architecture. The question was no longer simply what political label citizens preferred. The question was, what kind of institutions were they asking for? Today, the Nyalali Commission is often remembered for one recommendation: multi-party politics. But this dramatically understates what the Commission proposed. Nyalali was examining the architecture of political power. The Commission questioned the Constitution, presidential powers, the relationship between party and state, political freedoms, the administration of elections, and laws inherited from both colonial and one-party rule. Its recommendations pointed towards a much broader democratic reconstruction, a new constitutional framework, reduced presidential powers, stronger protection of rights, civic education, reform of institutions, and the repeal or amendment of laws considered inconsistent with democratic participation and human rights. This is crucial. The Commission's argument was not simply Tanzania needs more political parties. The broader lesson was closer to this. Multi-party politics requires institutions capable of managing multi-party competition. And that distinction would become enormously important, because Tanzania implemented one recommendation very quickly: political parties. The deeper institutional reforms would prove much harder. Perhaps the most revealing part of the Nyalali reform agenda concerned the law itself. The Commission identified approximately 40 areas of legislation that it considered oppressive, outdated, unconstitutional, or inconsistent with democratic rights. Some had colonial origins, others had been adopted after independence. Together they showed how deeply political control could be embedded in ordinary law. The Preventive Detention Act allowed detention outside the ordinary criminal trial process. The Societies Ordinance gave the state significant authority over associations. The Newspapers Act shaped the legal environment for the press. The National Security Act protected state information through broad security provisions. The Emergency Powers Act provided exceptional government powers during emergencies. The regional and district commissioners' legislation gave centrally appointed administrators extensive authority. Other laws concerned deportation, removal of so-called undesirable persons, human resources deployment, public order, criminal procedure. These laws regulated many of the activities that make political competition possible. They influenced whether citizens could organize associations, whether political parties could hold public meetings, whether newspapers could criticize those in power, whether demonstrations could take place, and how much discretion state authorities possessed when responding to political opposition. Individually, each law addressed a different area of public administration. Taken together, however, they shaped the legal environment within which democratic competition would either expand or remain constrained. The Commission's concern was structural. Imagine introducing opposition parties, while retaining laws developed in periods when organized political opposition was either restricted or constitutionally impossible. A multi-party system does not operate only on election day. Opposition parties must organize, hold meetings, publish information, criticize government, mobilize supporters, challenge administrative decisions, and sometimes protest. The legal environment governing those activities determines whether political competition is merely permitted or genuinely protected. In 1994, Tanzania's Law Reform Commission examined the legislation identified by Nyalali. Some laws were amended, some were repealed, others survived, and this produced a pattern that would recur throughout Tanzania's democratic transition. Reform, but not complete reconstruction. In 1992, Tanzania formally changed its political system. The constitution was amended. The constitutional monopoly of one political party ended. The Political Parties Act created the legal framework for registering political parties. Opposition organizations could now operate legally. CHADEMA emerged. The Civic United Front, CUF, became particularly influential in Zanzibar. NCCR Mageuzi, the Tanzania Labour Party, and other parties entered the political arena. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, CCM could legally face an organized party seeking to replace it in government. This was a profound political change. It should not be minimized. Tanzania had moved from constitutionally mandated one-party politics to constitutionally recognized multi-party democracy. But something equally important did not happen. Tanzania did not adopt a new constitution. The 1977 constitution remained. It was amended. The references establishing one-party supremacy were changed. Multi-party democracy was inserted into the constitutional order. But the basic architecture of the state remained largely intact. The presidency, the union structure, the administrative system, the relationship between central and territorial government, and many constitutional appointment powers. Tanzania changed the political system inside the existing constitutional house. The question was whether changing the occupants was enough, or whether the house itself needed rebuilding. Political competition returned to Tanzania. New parties entered the political arena. Citizens could once again organize openly. That was a genuine and important democratic change. But another story unfolded at the same time. The constitution remained. Much of the institutional architecture also remained. Many ordinary laws remained as well. Tanzania introduced multi-party politics without replacing the constitutional framework that had governed the one-party state. And that raises a question far bigger than Tanzania. Can democracy flourish simply because elections become multi-party? Or do democratic elections also depend on the institutions that organize, supervise, and protect political competition? That question takes us to the next chapter of Tanzania's democratic journey. Because once political parties were allowed to compete, a new question emerged. Who controlled the rules of the competition? Because understanding elections requires more than counting votes. This will be discussed in detail in the next episode of our series, Tanzania's Incomplete Democracy Rebuilding. Please subscribe to be notified when we release the next episode. Like and comment below your perspective. This is Beyond the Headlines. From headlines to understanding. Thanks for watching.